What is going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 12 of the Half Price Concessions podcast, a friendly debate about who is the greatest driver of our lifetimes, featuring the one and only Buddy Payne. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's episode, I want to say thank you to everybody and anybody who has listened to any of our episodes, previous, or if this is the first episode of the Half Price Concessions podcast you're listening to. I just want to say thank you for being here. You could have picked anywhere else to be, and you chose to hang out with a couple of good old boys that are just talking racing. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Your listening means the world to us. Also, want to let you guys know we are now available on 5 apps for podcasts. There's 5 different ways you can listen on your smartphone or your tablet. We've been on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Stitcher for a couple weeks now, but now we are also available on CastBox as well as Pocket Cast. So there's 5 different apps, whichever one you choose to download, that support the Half Price Concessions podcast, and you can listen to previous episodes or brand new episodes. So be sure and go check out one of those apps and subscribe to us on whichever app you choose. Or if you choose to just listen to us on the desktop website, www.anchor.fm/HPC podcast, that's perfectly fine too. We're glad to have you listening however you listen. On to the topic of today's episode, the greatest drivers of our lifetimes. A lot of these sports shows and talk shows and radio shows, they like to debate about who's the greatest of all time. And me and Buddy, for all the things that we disagree on, we both agree it is literally impossible to compare drivers, athletes, whatnot from different eras, because different eras are they're different. That's why they're called different. Richard Petty's 7 championships come at a completely different time than Dale Earnhardt's 7 championships, and that's just in NASCAR. Think about sprint car racing, how much it's changed since the 70s and the 80s up to now into the 2010s. Think about drag racing, how much it has changed. So comparing eras to us is just completely unfair. There's no truly objective way in our minds to do it. So what we decided to do is make a list. We both made an individual list of, we've done a top 5 of the greatest drivers of our lifetime. And we're taking into effect not just NASCAR, but also IndyCar, Formula One, dirt racing, both sprint cars and late models. Any kind of discipline out there, as far as it's got 4 wheels, that's what we included in our top 5 lists. And we're probably going to disagree, but you know what? It's going to be a ton of fun, and we're not going to scream and holler or have no profanity cussing each other out. It's just for fun. And in the middle of all that, we also will have a nod and a salute to our local greatest drivers of our lifetimes. The drivers that we watched as kids growing up, as teenagers, and still as adults that get the job done and have had incredible success on the local levels. We didn't want to shut them out by any means just because they didn't quite get to the stage that some of these other drivers did. So buckle up and strap in. We're going to give you a ton of good stuff. And if you're a race fan, I know that you're going to appreciate this debate. Episode 12 of the Half Price Concessions podcast, the debate of who is the greatest driver of our lifetimes, is coming up in just a few moments. Hey guys, have you heard about Anchor? Well, you should. It's the easiest way to make a podcast. First and foremost, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your cell phone or your computer. Anchor will even distribute your podcast for you. It takes all the work out of it. Your podcast can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Just download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. This episode of the Half Price Concessions podcast is brought to you in part by our friends at Performancenter Racing Warehouse. Located in Statesville, North Carolina, Performancenter Racing Warehouse provides racers with just about everything you need to go asphalt late model racing, including being the home of the PRW chassis. From a full-blown fabrication shop to services that can help you get your race car reclipped if you've been in the wall one too many times, or you just need to get your racing program straightened out. Give Roger Johnson and the folks at Performancenter Racing Warehouse the chance to earn your racing business by calling them today at 704-838-1400 and visit them online at performancenter.com. That's PERFORMANCENTER.com. Back on episode 12 of the Half Price Concessions podcast, Tyler Williams and Buddy Payne back with you once again. And Buddy, I think we've done more research for this episode than we did any book report
Feels
in
like
high
I'm
school.
High school. Yes, I feel like I'm in high school all over again.
But this was fun though. This was this is the most fun research I've ever done. Like, my wife was looking at me one night when I was on the couch on my smartphone and my laptop out, Googling all these stats and stuff, like, are you done yet? Are you going to come to bed yet? And I'm like, I'm having fun looking this up.
I had to discipline myself to stop looking because, like, the first night the battery on the laptop goes dead, and I'm not even through my third driver that I'm looking up there. It was there. Once you start digging into that, there's so much information out there.
So the concept for this is the greatest drivers of our lifetime, which I said a little bit in the opener that we didn't want to do a GOAT comparison because of all the things you and I disagree on, and we're going to disagree more as we go down this list, but we agreed on we hate the GOAT comparisons because they're just not fair. So tell me a little bit about what led you into this idea that you texted me for this episode.
Yes. Well, our last episode was right before you and I were both going to, I was going to World Finals, you're going to the North-South shootout, and at the World Finals, some history was made. 3 classes at the World Finals. You got the late model sprint cars and the big block modifieds, and in the modifieds and sprint cars, the championship was right down to the wire. I mean, we're talking single-digit points separating the two contenders for the championship going into that race, and the typical guy, the more dominant guy, did not win the championship. Matt Shepard in the big block modifieds did not win his championship, and he's won, I believe, 6 championships so far. And then, of course, Donnie Schatz in the sprint cars, he's a 10-time champion. He did not win his champion, so it just got me to thinking. I mean, I'm not going to say it's a changing of the guard or anything like that, because those guys are still very competitive and will probably be contenders next year. But it's nice to see a little bit of parity, and it just got me thinking, man, I've seen this guy win so many. It's nice to see somebody new. And then I started thinking of all the other guys, in our childhoods and, just growing up as race fans, just the guys that stand out. When somebody asks you about NASCAR when you were a kid, who's the first name that comes to your mind? And he's going to come to your mind because I saw him win a lot. He was always up front, or, whatever the case may be. And yes, I hate GOAT comparisons and all that stuff because it's impossible, too many variables. But I would like just have that conversation of who's the best guy you've seen in said discipline of racing. Yeah.
I think this is the kind of thing that we started this whole thing for. Honestly, because we hate hearing it on the radio when it's a GOAT comparison. We're like, we're going to do it our own way.
Oh, whatever. There's no news at ESPN. We're going to see who's better, LeBron or Michael James.
Yeah. Jeez. So before we get to our kind of national, international, if you will, top 5, we wanted to give a special nod to kind of the local drivers that we saw growing up as kids, and some that we still see race to this day. And we didn't want to hold something back from them just because they didn't have the funds or the means to get up onto that national level, because honestly, all these guys that are on our national list started at the local level, and they got the breaks, or they had the money or the backing, and they got to that level. But for every one on our national list, there's probably 100 of them that had talent but just didn't make it to that level. So we didn't want to completely shut out our local guys. So I've got a couple of guys, you've got a couple of guys, and we have one mutual one that we agree on.
Okay.
So we'll start off with I call it kind of local heroes, or the local weekend warriors that we saw growing up. So Buddy, since we're in your house, I'm gonna yield. You go ahead and throw the first one.
All right. Oh, for the local guys, this is in no particular order, but I will start with the king of the modifieds at Ace Speedway, Brian King. He was the man from when I very first started going to Ace, and even to just a couple of years ago when he was still running full time, with most wins, most championships in that division. It was a given. I mean, they would start him in the rear and 5 laps, man, he's leading. I mean, he was just most dominant, and you can say, whatever about the car or whatever, but I mean, the dude's got talent. I don't care how good your car is. And I remember going over there because his dad, Larry, and my dad, they were kind of buds, and I remember going over there, and Brian is sitting in the car. They got up on Jackson and stuff. He's sitting in the car, hand on steering wheel. I mean, he's just laser focused, and he's just going through the motions. He's got a timer to his right, and he's doing the turning motions. And he had like muscle memory memorized when to turn in at going in the corner and stuff like that. And just seeing that, I was like, this is why that guy is so stinking dominant.
He was a picture of precision. I remember Wednesday nights at Ace Speedway when I was working for the track. He was the only guy I ever saw bring. Robert Isley would come with him, and they would bring the laser to set up. And I was kind of sitting there thinking, I was like, it's cool he's getting lap times. But then over time, I was like, that's the only guy I saw do it.
Yeah.
He wanted those lap times, and the laser's way more reliable than the crew chief's stopwatch because you're not exact on that. He wanted the exact times. He was that was his measure. That was his, I guess, level of dedication.
Hey, it was one of the big modified races they did at the end of the year. I think some of the guys from Bowman Gray came down and whatnot. And I remember looking in his car, and he had a little digital display right there, right above the steering wheel, and it would flash the lap times every time it'd come up. Some of your guys, your spotter will tell you that or something, and some guys just don't even pay attention to it. They don't want to hear it, but it would pop up, and I think it'd show like the last 5 laps and stuff. And so just that amount of just dedication to something on a local level, it paid off. I mean, the guy's he's the best modified driver ever at Ace Speedway.
Well, since we're speaking Ace Speedway, I'll stick in that same category. My first local hero is Barry Begley, who we were lucky enough to have on the most previous episode. It's hard to beat a guy who won 2 national titles, only guy to win a NASCAR national title and an ASA national title, 4 track championships at Ace, 4 at Orange County, a South Boston title, Franklin County. And I think what I admired the most about him was in '93 when he was running for that NASCAR national title with Dennis Setzer, who would go on to race for a living. He had done as much as he could do at Ace and Orange County and stuff, getting points. So he had to. He went and sought out Dennis to race against him. Obviously, he needed to do that to ensure the national championship, but he actually was willing to travel and go to Tri-County and Hickory, tracks that weren't his home stables, and go after him head to head. And I really admired that. That's not something that everybody does nowadays. So I respected that about him, that he was like, all right, I've done what I need to do. Let's go make sure he doesn't, and not in a dirty way, but just I need to beat him.
Yeah. When I think Barry Begley, it was either South Boston or Martinsville. It was one of the big late model races, and they do the halfway break, and 10 minutes, do whatever you want to the car. And I remember he was leading, and he was the man to beat. He was leading. They pulled him in, lined everybody up on pit road. They jacked the car up, put it on jack stands. He got out of the car, went and got something to drink, and he sat on the pit wall. They did not touch that car. Yeah. They might have like air pressure adjustment, something like that. But he sat on the wall 10 minutes, got back in the car. They lowered on jack stands and went off and won the thing.
He did that at Ace. I remember some of the practices when he had made his comeback, where you see some cars come in, and as soon as the car hits the box, 10 guys jump on it, and they got the wrenches, and they're making chassis adjustments. Barry Begley had what looked like your grandpa's beach chair sitting in the hauler, and maybe his son would play with the air pressure a little bit, but if the car was where he wanted it, I ain't gonna, why are we gonna sit here and play with it?
Yeah, the track ain't changing.
Yeah, so that's just that old man wisdom. So Barry Begley along the Ace Speedway lines is, Black 82. When you were at any track in the area, when he was there, you were like, yep, him, Wayne Patterson, or David Triplett, they're going to be up toward the front.
That's
so,
right.
All right, who's your next one?
Next, I'm going to shift gears, literally, and I'm going drag racing and Todd Tutterow. Some of y'all might know him from his NHRA fame now, but Todd Tutterow used to run the Big Dog Shootout at Piedmont Drag Strip and used to love going to the Big Dog. And I'm not saying he's the greatest ever and that kind of stuff, but to me, it just stands out. There for a stretch, he was the man to beat. I mean, he was always setting, not quick time, I guess. He was always P1 for qualifying. He has the track records at Piedmont. Fastest overall, he ran a 367 in a pro mod.
That's moving right there.
In an eighth of a mile, man, that is kicking. And then in the big dog cars, which are a little different than the pro mods, he ran a 373. And those records still hold up to the day. But I mean, he won multiple championships of the big dog championships. He won just about every big dog race, it seemed like, there for a while. So much that he got enough recognition to move on. Him and Chris Rini had some good battles back in the day. Travis Harvey would give him a run for his money, but Tutterow was, when you showed up, man, that's who you had to beat. And and another local guy kind of making that step up. It's great to see him having some success on the NHRA. He's running strictly pro mods now. I know he kind of sniffed a few of the different divisions, but he's kind of found his home in the pro mods and is very competitive.
Tutterow, to me, it's funny because Piedmont gets something that, or drag racing in general gets something that we don't get at asphalt or dirt circle track, and it's diversity in the crowd.
Yeah.
It's you go to Piedmont, it's usually half and half white, half black, and you got some Hispanic and stuff mixed in there too. And Tutterow was the first guy I seen at a racetrack that had the black people and the white people pulling for him, and it was just, you just don't get that at the other tracks. I wish it was a little more diverse, but you go to the drag strip and you see or hear Tutterow's name called across the speaker system, or hear him in the box. It generates a response that you just don't get from a lot of people.
And with the rivalry, if you want to call it that, there for a little while between him and Chris Rini, it was the Ford Chevrolet thing. Now, of course, we both know there ain't nothing Ford or Chevrolet about those cars. It's all custom built stuff.
The sticker on the car.
Exactly, which ain't even made in America probably. But he for a while he would run the Mustang body, an older Mustang like a 60s model, and then Chris Rini had the 69 Camaro, that red, burgundy and silver, and then of course the blacked out Ford. And so drag racing, you still had the Ford Chevrolet stuff going on, but it was definitely a crowd reaction. When that name was said, the crowd reacted. Most of the time it was cheers too.
Yeah, pretty popular. My next one, I'm actually going to go a little bit of A Speedway, but more Hooters Pro Cup. When I was looking through guys that I saw race as a kid that weren't the local guys at A Speedway, Bobby Gill popped up to me because I remember my first Pro Cup race back when the Hooters Pro Cup was it was a big deal. Yeah. It was cup racing for short track guys. Todd Massey got into it, Robert Turner, Jason York, Keith Woody, a lot of these local guys, Jay Fogelman. This was where they could step up and run for bigger purses that they weren't going to get to cup because they just didn't have the money. And Bobby Gill popped up just because I remember every Pro Cup race we went to looking for that black. It was always a black number 5. And, I mean, Bobby was going to be tough to beat. And I actually looked up his stats. Not only is he still the all-time, I guess he'll forever be the all-time wins leader now because the Pro Cup is now Cars Tour and it's not the cars it used to be, but 46 wins on the tour from 99 to 09. And those were 34, 33 races a year.
Those are tough competition, absolutely.
I mean, they ran everywhere. I mean, they were older style cars, they were heavy cars. Speed Vision, I should say. I'm going to use the correct term. Speed Vision had them on TV, so they were easy to get to actually watch the races. And I mean, Bobby was tough. And then that one year in 2002, of 22 starts he made, he won 14. I don't care if you run in baby carriages or dirt bikes, when you have a winning percentage like that on touring series competition, that's something to say. So Bobby Gill was one that I wanted to give some love to. But then the last one is one that we both agree on, and we are going dirt.
Yes. Ricky Weeks is
the Rutherfordton Rocket.
Yes, that's right. Ricky Weeks, the Carolina Clash series, the Super Late Model series, They started, I think it was in 2000, maybe 2001. And my dad and I, we both worked at a dirt track in Elkin, North Carolina called Friendship Speedway. And Ricky would run there. They ran Super Late Models weekly. That was just a regular class. And we had a great field of cars. You know, him, Phil Hall, the Smiths would show up, Freddie and Jeff, Billy Hicks, just to name a few. And Ricky, man, he was just the guy to beat in the weekly stuff. And then when this class, it was really, for local guys, it was really like the first like good tour for opportunity for local guys, because a lot of tracks then were running super late models as a part of their regular program. And so kind of bring them all together, and then let's go hit up these different tracks. So it started out as a great idea, a great tour. And Ricky, man, he just, that was just right in his wheelhouse, because they visited a lot of tracks that he knew. And they would dip down, you know, tracks in Georgia, a little bit Tennessee, but most of it was North Carolina, South Carolina, hence Carolina Clash. But from 2004 to 2008, he won, he's second all time on the wins, with 37 wins. He's a 5-time class champion, and that was from 04 to 08, won all those in a row. And just wherever he showed up, that, of course, dirt late model, everybody's number one, it seems like. But
yeah.
that number one, he was the man to beat. I remember watching him, Mike Duvall, and Freddie Smith at Cherokee. This was the old configuration, the big half mile, and they put on a great show. This was it might have been a blue gray. I remember it was towards the end of the year, so it's probably a blue gray race. And Ricky, man, he had that track dialed in. The old Cherokee, it was very fast. It was very high banked, and it was one just particular line, kind of like a widthful line that you had to run to be able to pass.
Kind of like going in high, coming off low.
Yeah, that kind of thing. You come in the corner and just kind of dip down in the middle, but come off high. And a lot of guys, they would come in, try to stay low, and then they just wouldn't have that traction come off the corner. And Ricky just had that line down perfect, and that's where, you know, just one of the tracks that had many success. But even still today, I know he's got some age on, but he's still out there racing today. The little the Blue Ridge Outlaw, yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, he's probably got the most wins on that, because every time I look up the results, you know, he's winning, won the championships and stuff. So yeah, he as for local guys, Ricky Weeks was the man.
I always put, you know, Ricky obviously was incredible. Just you read off the stat line, awesome accomplishments. The fan base for him. And I remember always the fan base for Rambo.
Yeah.
When Rambo was really, really going strong there in the early 2000s and stuff. I mean, it was. I think that's really a perfect mix for this, because it's a local guy who is still technically traveling, even though he's not going to Ohio or Wisconsin like the national guys do, but he's still willing to travel and get out there and get wins, not just show up points. He was getting, like you said, a lot of wins.
Well, he's the atypical regional guy. You know, that tour was designed for regional racers. It's to give them an opportunity, you know, to run for a points championship, you know, make some extra money. All their races are going to be, I think, a minimum of $4,000 to win. So it's like you said, it's just a perfect combination. It's a local guy who can travel, you know, 3 to 4 hours and hit all these tracks, make some money, and he was the man everywhere he went.
Yeah. So that is our nod to kind of the local heroes, the weekend warriors that we grew up, and some of them we still watch race. We even had a few honorable mentions we could have added in there, but for time's sake, we'll move on to the big daddy, the national list, the one that it was terribly tough on, I know, my part to get this down to a top 5, because I've included drag racing, NASCAR, dirt late models, sprint cars, Indy cars, and Formula One. And, you know, God forbid we'd added into two-wheeled racing. We'd have been here for a lot longer. We'd have been here for hours.
I always feel like I should apologize to these drivers I left off the list, because they have so many accomplishments. But that I really had to stay in the frame of mind of, yes, he was good, and he may even have had better stats. But when I think of, you know, racing from my lifetime so far, when you say, you know, NASCAR, this is going to be the guy I immediately think of, or when you say, you know, drag racing or whatever. So I really had to keep it personal. So listeners, you're probably going to disagree with our list. I about guarantee you're going to disagree with our list, but this is just on a personal level.
And also, we have to keep in mind that this is not greatest of all time. Right. So when we mention these names, we are not crediting them with accomplishments from before we were alive or cognizant of what was going on. Doesn't mean they didn't accomplish it, but like, just for example, on my list, Dale Earnhardt only gets credit for 4 titles because I was born in '88.
Right.
I wasn't around in '80 and '86 and '87. So you have to remember that. That's something that I think I had to remind myself a few times when I made this list. Was like, just because they raced in part of their era was in my life, I can't give them credit for the whole thing for this specific list because I'm trying to keep it 88 on for me.
Well, just curious, what age or year when you really start remembering racing, just in general? Like for me, I was told that I went to Rockingham to watch a Busch race when I was 3 years old with my dad. I don't remember nothing about it, obviously, but like around that 5-year, 6-year-old range, I remember going to Darlington with my dad. I'm pretty sure that was in 94 maybe. So I'd been 7 really then, but kind of that 5, 6, 7 range is when I really start remembering, okay, I remember going to this race, I remember seeing this car and stuff. What kind of year or age was that for you?
Mine was 92, not 92, 93. I was 4, I was turning 5 in August of 93 because my first memory of racing is the 1993 Daytona 500. My uncle, Bert Schaffner, was building engines for Penske, so we were a Rusty Wallace family, not just a household.
I got you.
And Rusty Wallace got turned over on the backstretch and pirouetted and flipped about 9 times. And an emotional me went crying to my room. My birthday cake on my 5th birthday had Rusty Wallace on the cake, and my uncle got him to autograph a picture of it for me. I think I still have that somewhere.
Cool. That's cool.
So that's probably my first memory, but as far as like being aware, probably 6 or 7.
Okay.
But I think, in fairness to this, the stuff from 88 to the 92, 93 part, I've gone back and watched a ton of it. YouTube, thank God for YouTube, and Dirt Vision and some of the stuff, so you can go back and watch a lot of it. But that's kind of when I became cognizant.
Okay. Yeah, we're kind of the same time frame. Like I remember bits and pieces and stuff, but as far as like vividly remember, I'd say probably that 92 to 94 range is kind of when I really started picking up on it.
We just grew up watching so much racing. Because I know for me, it was A Speedway Friday night with my grandpa. Saturdays we'd rotate to 311 South Boston, Orange County. Sometimes we'd go to Caraway. And if we weren't at a race, we watched every NASCAR race on Sunday, the Busch race, Speed Vision. That old man watched 2 channels, Speed Vision and Westerns. So we watched a lot of racing.
Good, bad, ugly.
Yeah. A lot of gun smoke.
That's right.
So, but, and with technology now, there's so much stuff you can just go back and watch, and you're just like, man, I wish I'd have seen that live, but I'm glad I can see it now.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. So
now it's time to make everybody mad.
All right.
Now we dive into top 5, and we're gonna ping pong this. So I'll give my 5, Buddy will give his 5, 4, 4, 3, 3, and then we'll disagree along the way. But you know what? Before we get into that, why don't we each pick either 1 or 2 honorable mentions that didn't make our top 5 that were at least in our research, and I'll start first on this one. So I made you go first on the local one. Someone I left off this list that I hated that I left off, the Rocket Man, Josh Richards from Dirt Late Model Racing. Unprecedented success in the World of Outlaws Late Model Racing. He's the only 4-time champion of that National Touring Series. 76 Outlaw wins. I mean, incredible stats for Josh. He was driving for a great team, but the team didn't drive the car. Josh still drove the car, and still somebody that when we talk today about talent, just pure talent in a dirt late model, Josh Richards gets put in the top 5 just on talent alone. So I hated he didn't make my top 5, but I mean, golly, Josh Richards, what a run just in our lifetime, because I think he's about our age, actually.
Yeah, I think he's 32, 33, something like that. Josh, obviously his dad's Mark Richards, owner and founder and builder for the Rocket Chassis. Phenomenal talent, like you said. He holds so many records and whatnot, and still a lot of great years left for him. Currently with the Clint Boyer racing team. Still very successful. I can't talk too much about him because he might show up on my list a little later.
I know Casey Roberts is a big fan of his from an incident at Friendship that we saw. But
so it's like that ring imprints on his forehead.
Yeah. Right? So, what's one of your honorable mentions?
I'm just going to say these guys were great, but they didn't quite make the list for me. It's actually going to be a 1A and a 1B, both IndyCar drivers / kart drivers. I'm going Scott Dixon 1A and Dario Franchitti 1B. Scott Dixon, 5 championships, 29 poles, 45 wins, 112 podiums. He only has one Indy 500. Yes, that's more than I'll ever have. But Dario Franchitti with 4 championships, won 3 in a row, 21 wins, 57 podiums, and 23 poles. Champ Car, 10 wins with the Champ Car guys, and he has 3 Indy 500s. So kind of 1A, 1B. Early years watching IndyCar, both those teams just stick out to me. Both those drivers stuck out to me. Dario Franchitti probably has a little more success outside of IndyCar as well with the road racing stuff. He ran some of the V8 supercars in Australia. Scott Dixon still from time to time doing the IMSA stuff, the prototype racing stuff. So both great drivers, just not quite good enough to make my top 5.
That open wheel one, especially for IndyCar, is just so tough because you had so much discourse. You had USAC, and then you had CART, and then in '96 the Indy Racing League comes in, and I think it all had negative impact on the popularity of the sport, and the drivers got caught in the middle, like where am I going to run? I can't cover all my bases, so that hurts them, I think.
And it's crazy to think, when we were kids, IndyCar was the premier open wheel racing.
Indy 500 was a killer,
and I mean it's still very popular. But as far as open wheel racing, here recently it's been F1, but IndyCar was more popular than F1. Like you had F1 guys coming to IndyCar to race.
I think it was '91, the defending world Formula One champion. I forget his dang name.
Was that Senna?
No, I don't think it was Senna. I remember Despain talked about it because he was like the height of CART was 91 when they got the top Formula One guy to come run for him.
Yeah,
which is unheard of now.
Exactly,
you wouldn't do that now except for the Indy 500.
Well, it's reversed now. You got guys that your best IndyCar guys can't even get a ride in F1 hardly. So. It is just crazy to see, I agree with you. When you start splitting up and you have so many divisions and everybody's trying to get a piece of the pie, there's not enough pie left to go around, and now we see IndyCar suffering today, unfortunately.
My last honorable mention, boy, I'm leaving some on my honorable mentions. I'm making myself mad. I left Lewis Hamilton off my top 5, and I know that he's probably on your top 5. I left him off there just so I wouldn't have 2 Formula One guys in my top 5. There is someone that beats him. I won't name him yet, but I did leave Lewis Hamilton off. But I mean, golly, 6 world titles, 83 wins, 150 podiums. You turn on a Formula One race, Lewis Hamilton is probably winning or is near the front, and what probably more recent fans that are on the Lewis Hamilton bandwagon don't know, not all those were Mercedes. That first one, I think, was that Renault or was that
Williams,
McLaren? Was it Williams?
I know he had a short stint with Williams, and it might have been McLaren.
I think it was McLaren.
It was McLaren, right. and because that was a big controversy when he made that switch, because McLaren was a top team, and then when he made that switch to Mercedes, he was like, "What's this guy doing?" And then we see Mercedes now. They're top dog. So
yeah. Sorry, I left him off my top 5.
Hey, you ain't got to apologize to me. I appreciate him. I am not a fan.
Yeah,
but I appreciate all he's doing.
So anyway, you want to get one more before we get into the list?
Well, oh man,
we're gonna have to leave somebody off again.
Yeah, I think the way I'm going to do it is whenever I give my driver, I'm just going to give a very quick honorable mention because there's just too many guys I can't leave off.
All right, so now here comes the top 5.
Okay.
So on Tyler's number 5 on my list, I'm going with Jimmy Johnson, who actually just announced that next year is going to be his last full-time year in the Cup Series. Just in my lifetime, 7 championships, I think 5 of them in a row. And I know the point system is controversial. I don't like the point system. I don't think racing suits itself to a playoff-style format. Our sport isn't like ball and stick where, everybody competes every race in racing. They don't do that in other sports. But it's not Jimmy's fault. He just raced. He didn't come up with a point system. And they kept changing it, trying to keep him from winning. But then I look also at the win total, and it's hard to combat 83 wins. He's 6th all-time on the wins list behind guys like Gordon and Pearson and Petty. And, I mean, he's ahead of some really awesome names. So Jimmy Johnson in NASCAR, as much as I did not like him because he was winning so much, and at times I thought he was too clean-cut and too corporate, the talent behind the wheel is at least in a NASCAR Cup car, was just incredible. He rivaled Jeff. I think he was actually better than Jeff Gordon, and that's an unpopular opinion. But he's got more rings. He's got more wins. He's almost got more wins. He's got more championships. He epitomized a big chunk of my lifetime in NASCAR. So Jimmy Johnson from NASCAR is my number 5.
My number 5 is Jimmy Johnson from NASCAR.
Hey, we agree.
Look at that. All right. Yeah, Jimmy Johnson, I mean, he was the man from 2002 when he first came in. I know last couple of years he's struggled a little bit. That was a tough one to put him, because when I think like NASCAR, like in that 90s and stuff, it was Jeff Gordon at first. But when I started looking at the stats and stuff, I mean, Jeff Gordon had that ridiculous run from like 96 to 98.
There's that one year he won like 13 races or something crazy.
I mean, he was just ridiculous. And this is not my Earnhardt bias, the reason why I didn't pick Jeff Gordon. I appreciate, looking back on it, I really appreciate the just the rivalry and what it did for the sport. I mean, it helped grow the sport. But I mean, Jimmy Johnson, man, in the 2000s era, he was the man. Like you said, 83 wins, 7 Chase championship wins there. From 2002 to 2013, he did not finish worse than 6th in the points.
That is incredible.
That is the 5 in a row. Like I said, I call him a Chase champion, not a true champion. But you know, that's just my Earnhardt bias, because he ain't a 7-timer like Earnhardt and Petty, in my opinion. But
can't compare eras. That goes back to our thing.
I know. But, no,
that's why we can't compare
exactly.
eras. Even the point system was different.
Absolutely, because if it was off of standard points, he'd only have 5 championships.
Yep. So, and Gordon would have had, I think, 6. I think Jeff Gordon would have had 6 under the class. They call it the classic points on jski.com.
Yeah. And Gordon, this was another reason why I did Jimmy Johnson over Gordon, because in that time frame of Gordon's time frame from like the 94-ish, I think, on up, he had 93 wins. So more years, 93 wins. Jimmy Johnson from 02 to current is at 83 wins. So he's won at a more rapid rate, higher percentage, if you will. My very quick, just sliding honorable mention for NASCAR was going to be Kyle Busch. I know there's a lot of controversy with the amount of wins and stuff, because he did run in the lower divisions, but I don't care what you're doing. 208 combined wins over the top 3 series, that is impressive. Again, you're the premier guy and you're stepping down to the minor leagues, but still to be able to go out there, put the laps together, even if you do have the best equipment, you still have to drive the car or truck in this case. So very quick honorable mention is going to be Kyle Busch, who, congratulations on his championship for this year, number 2 for the Cup.
You can't deny the talent, no doubt. Okay, let's. I think we're going to get done agreeing now.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Now, my number 4, I go IndyCar, and I'm going 88 on Al Unser Jr. I go Al Unser Jr. for a couple of reasons. Number 1, of his 4 championships, he splits them. 2 of them are USAC championships, and 2 are kart championships, because IndyCar, not like NASCAR, we talked about this a second ago, there was great divide. The reason kart even came to exist is because they got tired of how USAC sanctioned the Indianapolis 500. So Al Unser Jr. to win 2 USAC titles and 2 kart titles, also 2 Indy 500s, which is the fact you even win 1. It's incredible. Which is why it hurts for me to leave Helio Castroneves off this list, because Helio won 3, but he doesn't have the titles like Al Unser Jr. has, and then 34 wins. Just incredible, because in that time in the 90s, IndyCar racing was, it was incredible. Just the talent that was out there, the money that was out there. It's tough to see it now, because IndyCar has had to regress so much, and there's not as many cars out there. And you look at it now, and you're like, man, this is cool. But I'm like, man, if you'd have seen it in the 90s, especially those early 90s when we were kids, Michael Andretti, Christian Fittipaldi, Gilles de Ferran, just so much talent. And for me, it was tough. I could not find a better one than Al Unser Jr. for our lifetime.
That's a great pick. Al Unser, obviously the last name Unser is synonymous with open wheel racing.
And he ran NASCAR. I forgot about that. He ran some NASCAR.
He ran some NASCAR stuff. And one thing about Unser with IndyCar, if you don't know, for some of the fans who don't know much about IndyCar, they have an overall series championship, but they do a split between the road courses and the oval. So you have like an oval champion and a road course champion. And Al Unser was one of those guys who were good at both. Like now, you turn on the TV, there's guys who you can really tell the difference between one over the other. So that's a good pick. I'll move on to my number 4, which is someone you left off your list, was Mr. Lewis Hamilton. Technically, in my lifetime, Michael Schumacher had more stats, or better stats, excuse me, but I didn't really start following Formula One until Schumacher was kind of making his way out. But in my lifetime as a fan of Formula One, Lewis Hamilton has been the man. From 2007 to current, we've already kind of hit on it. The 83 wins. He has a career winning percentage, 33% of the races. So at 1 out of every 3 races he has entered, he's won.
If he was playing baseball, he'd be a Hall of Famer with that average.
Exactly. He's finished on the podium 60% of every of the races he's entered. The 87 poles in 249 races. His career average start is 3.9. His career average finish is 5th. That's video game numbers. That is just ridiculous. And he has not finished worse than 5th in points in the 13 seasons that he's run.
I mean, at that level, it's incredible.
It's ridiculous.
You're running it's not just different tracks. You're running different continents. And also, I think the dedication to his craft. He does a lot of stuff that you don't see that keeps his mind straight and the hand-eye coordination. And also, in these Formula One races, and I'll get to it with who's on my number 2, is you don't have as many laps to work with. It's not a 500-mile race. You got like 60-something laps. I mean, you goof up, you might not get time to really make that up.
The way I explain Formula One to my friends who are all NASCAR or all dirt or whatever, and they just don't get it, is these are the most technologically advanced cars on the planet. I mean, there's just ridiculous amount of technology in these cars. But Formula One racing, it's a different style racing. You're not going to have your pack racing and like you see in NASCAR and other stuff. It's the driver against the track. You're attacking the track. Yes, there's going to be cars in your way, and you have to deal with them when they come, but you're attacking the track. You have to hit those numbers, hit your marks every single lap, and like you said, just one little goof up. I mean, their pit stops are like 3 seconds. If you lose 1 second on pit lane, I mean, that's 10 car lengths on the track, which makes a big difference, as close really now as the cars are. But you're attacking the track, and now where they don't allow you to fuel the cars, all you can do is tire changes. You have to manage your fuel. You have to manage these tires because you have different compounds that you can run, softs all the way up to hards. You're racing in the rain. You're not going to see that on the NASCAR on the oval or anything like that. So there's so many factors into it, and it's driver against track while keeping everything underneath them and having enough at the end to where you can turn that computer wide open and just blaze some laps around through there.
And I think it goes without saying, of all the disciplines of racing, it's definitely the most expensive. When they tell Gene Haas, we don't know if you got enough money to run with us in Formula One, Gene Haas got enough money to buy out probably both our family trees and then have about $300 million left. I mean, incredibly expensive. So much money in this race.
When your fans show up to the race in yachts,
yeah. Monte Carlo,
they ain't showing up in the '87 Winnebago,
or the '92 Lumina van.
That's right.
Now to my number 3, Tyler's number 3. I'm going straight line. And I'm going with the guy, he's number 3 on this list, but if we did interviews, he is number 1 and then some. I am talking about the best funny car driver ever, Mr. John Force. And these are just the stats from 88 on. John Force, 16 funny car championships. Tony Schumacher, I gave a nod to, an honorable mention. He has 8 Top Fuel championships. But for John Force, 16 funny car titles. Number 1, his most entertaining interview any of us have ever heard. His interviews include all kinds of inappropriate content that I won't repeat. But I also think we talk about how racing changes. Mm-hmm. And even from 88 on, funny cars are incredibly different. And he is the constant. And he's almost lost his life. There's a couple of those wrecks I watched live that I thought, man, he's gone. And he even said, I should have been dead. And he's come back from them each time. And I know he's beat to snot. He's old. He's got the white hair. But he can still hit the tree. And he can still make runs. And even as he rotates crew chiefs, car manufacturers, sponsors, and partners, the constant is John Force. I mean, he'll get buried in a funny car. He ain't.
He's tried.
I'm about to say, but I could not leave John Force off my list. He's my number 3.
Yeah, John Force, just, I mean, non-race fans know that name, and the impressive thing is, like you said, the amount of change that he has seen in that sport, and he's just been consistently good throughout all of it. You know, going from a quarter mile to 1,000 foot, the aerodynamics on the cars and all the safety stuff that they've done to it, going from the 4 clutch to the 5 clutch to the 6 clutch, and more impressive to be that consistent and that good, and he's running his own operation. So not only does he have to focus on being a driver and getting his car down the track, he's on the phone with sponsors every day, just knocking down the doors trying to get money. He's got to manage his team. He's got his daughters, involved in racing and all this stuff. So I mean, that is a racer's racer, man.
And he came from nothing.
Like
some of these other people in drag racing. That nothing against them, but they came in with more resources. Like I think of Schumacher, and I think of the Grays and stuff. And I look at John Force, and I go back and listen to old interviews where he talks about living in a single wide in Yorba Linda, and just barely having Spam in the can and going racing. Mm-hmm. So anything that he has, I respect it in a different way because it all came from racing. Kind of like the Petties. Like the Petties didn't come into racing with money, and I look at kind of John Force that way. Like everything he has is from racing. He does not come from anything.
And I think that's what makes him really relatable to your old hot rodders, because most of your old hot rodders, I mean, that's their hobby. They get home from work, or they got a free Saturday, they're out in the garage and they're tinkering on something. And that's how John Force got into drag racing. Is he built his own cars, he went to the local strip, and that's how he started. And I think that's why. And like on the NASCAR side, like that heyday in the 80s and stuff, that's why so many people could relate to those guys, because they built this stuff. They didn't have the money, the resources, stuff like you said. So my number 3, this is the only one I guess I'm actually a huge fan of, and that is going to be, my opinion, the greatest dirt late model driver of all time, Mr. Scott Bloomquist.
Okay.
Scott's been racing for 30 plus years, but he's really probably the main reason why I am such an addict as I am with dirt late model racing. First time I remember seeing Scott run was a Have a Tampa race at 311, and he rolled out. He had just switched from the black 18 to the 0, and he rolled out.
Was he building his own cars yet, or was he running that Masters build?
He was still with Masters built then, and when he just rolled out on the track, just that paint scheme, that's the first thing, just immediately, and I was like, holy cow, who is this guy? And so that just drew my interest there. But we could spend the next hour me telling you everything this dude's accomplished and everything, but just a few quick hits. From 1990 to 2016, he has 13 national touring titles, whether it be Have a Tampa, World Outlaws, Lucas Oil, UMP Summer Nationals. Since 1994, he has 43 wins of $30,000 or more. And I could list all of those. He's, all the Pittsburgh 100s, all the Dirt Track World Championships, all that stuff. But just to kind of combine it there, 43 wins of $30,000 or more. Of course, at the Payne door, he has the most dreams, tied for the most worlds. But 8 dreams between 95 and 18. That's a $100,000 race right there. That's $800,000 in one race.
Yep.
That you won. So another kind of self-made guy from California. His dad didn't have much interest in racing. Scott goes with a friend to a racetrack, a little dirt track there. He says, hey, I think I can do this. Tries to talk Dad into getting him a car. Dad says no, so he works up, saves up, gets a car, builds it himself. Dad agrees to take him to the track. He said, I'm giving you one race. He goes out there and wins that race. And then as he gets better on the local deal, he's just that guy that he wants to be the best. He wants to be the best innovator. He wants to win every single race.
I feel really bad for leaving him off my top 5 now. I guess I didn't have the stats that you do because you're such a Bloomquist fan.
Oh yeah, but this is the one guy I did not have to look stuff up for. But one just real quick story, and then we'll move on. I was reading about when he moves to Tennessee, because back then, like your guys, like the guys to beat, I guess, would be Larry Moore. Rick Auckland was the man, and then Jeff Purvis.
Yeah.
And he wanted to be the best, and so he moved from California to Tennessee so he could race against these guys. That's crazy to start with. And the first race, again, this is when super late models were running, every Saturday night, Friday night, whatever, as part of the regular show. Track in Tennessee, they were paying $2,500 to win. for the super late model race. And, back early 80s, that's pretty good money. And he pulls in the pits, and there's Larry Moore. And his buddy said, well, we're running for second place tonight. And Scott goes out there, qualifies on the outside pole. Larry Moore's on the pole, He's outside pole. They go in turn one. Scott's leading coming off the backstretch, and he wins the race. The next week, Scott's on the pole. Larry Moore's on second. And never saw him again. And it just that's just a little inkling to how this guy, just how he ticks. He wants to be the best, and he's not afraid of the challenge. When Davenport and the whole Rumley guys, when they just redid how late models were built and drove, in that 2014-2015 season, a lot of guys are getting their butts kicked every week, and Scott took that challenge. And yes, he got his butt kicked for the first half of the year, but if you look at the stats,
he was at least close.
If you look at the stats at the last half of that year, he's National 100. He's winning that Charlotte. He won Blue Gray. So, he took that challenge and accepted it. So, that was my man. Real quick, honorable mention for the dirt late model guys. I'm just going to do a combo here with the Rocket House car number 1.
Yeah,
that's hard to split. Josh Richards, as you mentioned earlier, and then Brandon Shepard, what he's doing in that car now. But he's just a man to beat every weekend. 19 wins this year, almost broke the record, which is set by Josh Richards. Combined to have the most wins, most top threes, most poles, most heat race wins. They are World Outlaw late models.
Let's see, if Josh has 4 World Outlaws championships, how many does Shep have? Is it 3?
He's got he had, was it 2 this year?
Yeah. I know he won this year.
Yeah, and then he had the one previous because he was running the best performance car with the Lucas Oil guys.
Okay, so that one. But that Rocket House car will go down in history as probably one of, if not the best teams in dirt late model racing.
And I know our local guys, the Black Six with the Rumblies and stuff. And the only reason I did not mention them is because most of their stuff was regional. Yes, they ran the tour with Davenport a couple years ago, whatnot. But guys like Richards and Bloomquist, when you're doing it on the national level against the best of the best, traveling, going all these different tracks, to me that's a little more impressive.
All right, so now I get to my number 2. And my nod to Formula One, that is not Lewis Hamilton, I could not take him over Michael Schumacher. And I did make sure it was just from 88 on. But Michael Schumacher, 7 world championships, 91 wins, the podiums, 156 podiums. And for Schumacher, I think I started paying attention about 8 or 9 years old to some of the Formula One stuff. And I just remember I kept hearing Schumacher, Schumacher, Schumacher. And then I went back and looked at some stuff, and then I paid attention, kind of not as much as I pay attention now, but, just looking back at it, Michael Schumacher when you talk open wheel racing, you have to put him in there. If you did IndyCar and Formula One and on a combined Mount Rushmore, I think you have to have Michael Schumacher in there, which makes it all the much more sadder, the accident that he had, because you just know, what an incredible talent he was. And while he doesn't have the stuff stateside, which I think he would have been incredible at, he stayed in Formula One. That was his thing, and that's what he accomplished. So I had Michael Schumacher number 2 on my list for all his Formula One accomplishments.
Yeah, Schumacher, that was the first name I really remember, too. I had an old video game, Formula One video game, and I just remember he was always like the toughest car to beat. So I just wasn't privy to be able to watch those races back then. But I knew the name.
Well, you were on bunny ear cable.
That's right.
My dad upgraded to, I think it was, I don't know if it was Prime Star or what it was. You were lucky you got Channel 2.
This is how I learned about races back then. We would go to these races and they hand out the free Speed Sport magazines. And it's from 4 months ago, man. I'm like, holy cow, Michael Schumacher won this week, or John Force, some of these other names. But I knew the name, and I knew that red car, And but once I started really getting into it, it was very, very soon he had his accident stuff and just kind of fell off. But quick Michael Schumacher fact, if you did not know, the very popular TV show Top Gear, the British TV show, they have the driver in there called the Stig that goes out there and races the cars and stuff. Now I don't know if it was him the whole time, but they did do a show one time where they did a big reveal of him, pulls the helmet off, and it's Michael Schumacher. Yeah.
That's incredible. All right, now we're up to your number 2. Now we're getting down to it.
My number 2, I am going to go with the name you have already mentioned. That would be Mr. John Force. When I think drag racing, John Force, I was a big Kenny Bernstein fan back in the day, and then and he was more top fuel. But when he switched to the funny cars, I was like, I can't pull for you because I already got John Force there. But like you said, greatest interview in all of motorsports, but his stats are ridiculous. 151 wins. That's 53 more than second all time.
Yeah.
That's crazy. The 16 championships, 10 in a row from 1993 to 2002, 5 as an owner as well, and then 158 number one qualifiers.
I'll say also for John Force, probably, if not, the longest running sponsorship or partnership, I should say. I wouldn't know Castrol GTX from the Walmart brand oil that I have used because we don't have a lot of money in our household. But, I mean, he, to me, put that brand on the map. And he was always winning, and obviously his interviews were always great. But, I mean, that was, of all the guys I look on the list, it's hard for me to find somebody who had a longer partnership run. Maybe Jimmy Johnson with Lowe's, but John Force and Castrol, I mean, that's, you thought of Castrol, you thought of John Force.
Yeah. He was synonymous with Castrol and Ford Mustang. And so when he switched over to Chevrolet, I was like, what is happening? This dude got saved or something. I don't know. But
when the green came off the car, that to me was like the equivalent of STP coming off the Petty car.
Yeah.
That's how and it sounds weird because it's sponsorship. It's not supposed to be an emotional thing or anything, but it's like, it's synonymous.
Exactly. And you've bought all this merch and swag and stuff that's got that on there. You know, I remember buying the Castrol and they give you the little die-cast cars. I got like 8 of them out in my shop right now. It was just, you don't really see that as much these days. But like you said, these great drivers and a lot of these guys we've talked about, they've been synonymous. You know, Josh Richards in the Rocket 1, Valvoline, blue number 1. You know, he was off the list, but Earnhardt, Black 3, Goodwrench. You know, he was one of those guys that, when you think John Force, you immediately think funny car, you think Castrol, you think green, Ford Mustang.
Yep. All right, now down to our number ones. My number one, 88 Ford, greatest driver of my lifetime. It can be none other than the king of the Outlaws, Steve Kinser. And I had to be careful because I know Kinser's career goes before 88. So I'm just looking 88 Ford, and I still could not find anybody that tops 12 World of Outlaws championships, running up and down the road 85, 90, 95, 100 times a year in a sprint car, and just World of Outlaw wins. I did not count, or I didn't research, rather, the non-World of Outlaw sanction wins. 357. I mean, my goodness. I mean, just incredible. And I know, and some people still bag on him like there wasn't competition, like there wasn't Doug Wolfgang and Steve Kinser and, not Steve. I started to say Steve Kinser. Doug Wolfgang. Sammy Swindell is the name I was trying to think of. You know, a young Donnie Schatz comes up. And obviously, toward the tail end of his career, he tails off and he has to use provisionals. But you can't turn on a sprint car race on TNN in the 90s and not be focused on Steve, thinking it's Steve Kinser versus everybody else. And there's a lot of guys that had accomplishments, but I couldn't find someone better than Steve Kinser. I mean, longevity and just success. And you know what? Jason Turner gave me grief on this one. Guy said something about Kinser. And he's like, well, he got to run, 100-something times a year. I'm like, yeah, but he still had to win.
Yeah.
Just because he got more opportunity doesn't mean you hold back on 357 freaking World Outlaw wins. And that's the national tour in sprint cars. I mean, God knows how many Knoxville National wins he has, and I didn't count those. I should have looked that up, but I couldn't top Steve Kinser.
Well, I'm a Steve Kinser fan, and was a Steve Kinser fan, I should say. He's the king. That's why he has that name, King. You got King Richard, you got King Kinser. Just you've said it all. I mean, the guy, he was just pure dominance, and his level of competition over technically 4 decades that he's raced against. The level he has seen all those people. That 97, 98 year, in my opinion, was like the most competitive for the World of Outlaws. The names you mentioned, a few that you left off, Danny Lasowski, after he teams up with Tony Stewart. Stevie Smith was a very tough competitor back then as well. And then, of course, they're running all these different regions, and then you had all your regional guys who are, outstanding. I mean, that was probably the toughest as far as talent, because you had 5, 6 guys that could legit win that championship. The I don't want to interrupt you. Are you done with your Kinzer talk?
Well, I was just going to say, like, and also for Steve, and this doesn't play into the 88 on.
Okay.
But you talk about a guy who, along with your Doug Wolfgangs and your Sammy Swindells, that because of their dedication and how much they ran every year, helped bring sprint car racing to the level it is now. Because those guys, not only were they willing to go travel and do this, but they had the talent. They could put on a show. It was entertaining racing, and Steve Kinzer was obviously my top dog, but he's, all those guys as well. They made sprint car racing as popular as it is today because there were a lot of hiccups in the road. This thing could have kind of gone away a little bit, but they, Ted Johnson, World Outlaws, and Steve Kinzer are humongous reasons that sprint car racing is where it is today, where it is now. We need to put in more seats at the dirt track in Charlotte.
That's right.
To go see him run.
I see, and much like Forrest, Kinzer's another one that was synonymous with that green, number 11, Quaker State.
Yep.
It was just one of those that was synonymous with that car, which I'm so glad that was your number one, because my number one, also coming from the World Outlaw sprint cars, and this is probably going to be a shock to you, but I went Donnie Schatz over Steve Kinzer. And I am a Kinzer fan, and I will boo Donnie Schatz because I'm tired of seeing him win every single race.
And he drives a Ford.
Now.
Which I like, but you don't like that.
But being unbiased, and the reason why I did not put Kinzer as number one is because he did have a lot of his success in the 80s. And when I first started really noticing and paying attention and getting into sprint cars, he ran 1 year. Then the next year he took his break and attempted the NASCAR stuff. So there was 2 years there I didn't see him. He attempted doing NASCAR. He actually qualified for the Indy 500 and was running top 10 and had a late mechanical failure there and took him out there. I think that was 96.
Yeah, Robin Miller said that is the only good thing that came from the CART RL split is that Steve Kinzer got to run the Indianapolis 500,
yes.
which thank God he got to. He deserved, as an open wheel racer, he deserved to be in that race.
And he had some success with the IROC guys too. Didn't even think about that. But and then he comes back, and so when he comes back, that's when I'm really cognizant and paying attention to all that stuff. So in that time frame, he only won 5 of those 20 championships, and that was from 98 to 05. Donnie Schatz, I've seen his whole career from 97 on. So 97, he's Rookie of the Year, 10 championships from 2006 to 2018. He won 4 in a row, a 10-time Knoxville National Champions. That race pays $150,000. That is $1.5 million off of one race alone. 299 wins, still trying to get that 300th. And his most impressive season, 2014, 26 wins, 63 top 5s, 80 top 10s, and that was in 86 races. That's just consistency. Donnie Schatz, still the man to beat. He lost the title this year by a whopping 4 points. He's another one of those that kind of started on his own. He had his own funded team. He didn't just jump into a ride, and then he proved himself, and so he earned that Tony Stewart ride. He's had a great combination with his mechanics and stuff along the way. But I mean, even to this day, when you show up to a dirt track or when you watch one on TV, Donnie Schatz is going to be the man to beat.
I think another thing on Donnie, just to piggyback on this year, to only lose the championship by 4 points, and in the middle of the championship run, he switches engine manufacturers. They switch over to the Ford because Tony Stewart Racing is affiliated with Ford Performance. And I know on Open, I don't know if it was Open Red, it was the banquet. I think he said, man, I was really hesitant.
Oh yeah.
About switching over to this motor thing. He said, but we made it work. And to me, that meant a lot because, I mean, that's arguably the most important part of your race car is the motor that makes it go. As far as just the mechanical side, you got to have the motor. Obviously, you got to have the aerodynamics and the wing and the setup, but the motor is incredibly important. But also with Donnie, another thing is when you watch him race, just if you don't know a stat, if you just go and watch him race, he hits lines on every track that no one else hits. You will not see someone else cut the middle of a racetrack the way Donnie Schatz cuts the middle of a racetrack. Nothing against the guys that bang the top all the time or that ride around the bottom all the time. I mean, just from the eyeball test, I remember watching, I'm like, man, no one else runs that line. Mm-hmm. And he just, he's up to the front from wherever he was coming from.
the engine change you were talking about, the crazy thing about that is they were leading the points when they made that decision. Like, what are you doing making this big of a change, in the middle of a season where we're in a tight points battle, and to still come up just a couple points shy? That's just amazing. His driving style, like you said, you got guys, bottom feeding or pounding the cushion, and he's just running in the middle, or he's diamonding corners. And so he's just doing stuff nobody else can do. And I've heard no few drivers say, when they get done with the race, they ask, where was Donnie running? They want to know where he's running. And Brad Sweets, he had a funny comment in the banquet. He said he used to ask where Donnie Schatz was running, and he got tired of hearing middle every time. He's like,
but no one else could do it.
Nobody could do it.
That's pure talent right there.
It's just slicked off in the middle, and he could somehow hit that and make it work. And I've heard Donnie say where he really expanded that part of his driving was from running a late model. And kudos to him to step out of something, into a world that, yes, it's dirt, but it's a completely different car. And he's been successful there. He's run some, weekly stuff, your local stuff, and he just learned he's applied the way you drive a late model into sprint car racing. And you're starting to see guys like Gravel and Sweet starting to ease in there. They'll start running that middle lane or start dominating stuff. But most of your guys that are coming from like the midgets and stuff, where it's a momentum game, it's just pound the top. And Donnie's just been one of those guys that, no, I can do it differently and make you have to beat me that way.
Yeah, I mean, Donnie is the standard of today. I mean, when you watch, anytime I come over to your house to watch Dirt Vision and we watch a sprint car race, there's two things you're keeping up with, or I'm at least keeping up with. I'm keeping up with, you know what, I make it three actually. Who's in the lead? Where's my driver? I like Sheldon Haudenschild. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, all right, where's the 15 amp? I know he's, and if you get inside 10 laps to go, he's coming. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're in the cow pasture or you're in Knoxville. You're like, all right, where's the 15? I know he's coming. Unless he's broke,
yeah,
he's coming.
And I cannot recall how many times, like the very rare times where he does have mechanical issues or blown tire or something like that, or he never wrecks, but if he has to spin to avoid a wreck or something like that, and he does go to the pits, I'm like, I'm not going to cheer because he's going to finish in the top 10. I don't care if there's still 24 cars out there. And sure enough, man, he just comes back every time. You know
what's crazy? Both our number ones drove for Tony Stewart Racing.
Yeah.
Obviously, Schatz is 10 years more successful because he's more in his prime, whereas Kinzer was kind of toward the back half of his career. But hey, give a nod to Tony Stewart. He had them both.
He had an eye for talent.
I remember he had, at one point, I think when Tony had the most drivers driving for him, and then I think he finally was like, all right, we're spending too much money. He had Donnie Schatz. He had Steve Kinzer. He had Brian Clausen running, I think it wasn't Silver Crown. I think it was just a USAC National Midget. Had Brian Clausen. Had Bobby East, who on USAC National Midgets is an incredible talent. Kudos to Tony Stewart for giving these guys chances. Obviously now he's down to one with Donnie because he doesn't probably have as much money coming in because he doesn't drive himself anymore. But I mean, how about the willingness to go get those guys? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I love seeing the guys who did make it big. I guess most of the time that's going to be NASCAR these days. But pouring back into the avenue that got them there. We're seeing Clint Boyer do it, seeing Casey Kane do it, and Tony do it. And Tony's racing himself now. So always great to see that.
Well, we didn't disagree as bad as I thought we would. I thought we were going to have a knockout drag-out. I hate that Dale Earnhardt didn't make my list. I hate Jeff Gordon didn't make my list. And I'm trying to think. Yeah, I'm still, man, I might have made a mistake with leaving Lewis Hamilton off my list, but that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Just off the cuff, just a question for you, off the cuff. Of all the drivers we just mentioned, some of them are still in their heyday, still doing their thing, but some of them are starting to kind of take the corner, or, guys like Jimmy Johnson's just about to retire. Of just the massive amount of talent now across any motorsport. Let you pick whatever motorsport.
Boy.
What's one young guy, and I'll say young, sub 30. You think 10 years from now he would be on our top 5 list. Just you pick whatever motorsport you want, and just one young guy that you see right now that they're going to be on the list like this. They're going to have these kind of accomplishments.
Sub 30 is tough because Kyle Busch, I think, is 34.
Yeah.
So I can't have him. Can't have Brad Keselowski. I almost, as far as numbers go, I think Joey Logano will get close, but still ways to go on that one. It's tougher in NASCAR now because there's a bunch of like one-time, two-time champions now. There's not a lot of 4- and 5-time champions. A young guy, honestly, I think, and this is all dependent on what's going to happen with his turn for NASCAR, but David Gravel he swept World Finals. That in itself is crazy because that is a hell of a field at Charlotte. But David Gravel to sweep World Finals, to win Knoxville Nationals, just all the wins he piled up. I think he was up to 50. I mean, and he's incredible. Yeah, incredibly young guy. Finished third in points. He's going to get a shot at NASCAR, I guess, through that relationship with Jeff Gordon and Exalta. I don't wish bad on him, but if he stayed full-time in a sprint car, I think David Gravel that's the first name really coming to my mind, honestly.
Yeah. That's a tough one because you don't know what discipline those guys are going to stay in because that's
if his talent translates to NASCAR, he's gone.
Oh yeah, and we've seen Josh Richards, prime example, attempted and it just didn't pan out for him for numerous reasons, but it just didn't pan out for him. And so yeah, that's a tough one to try and see which discipline they stay in. I would say if Bobby Pierce, who's a super late model dirt driver, if he stuck with dirt late models, I think he could be one of the all-time greats, but I don't see that happening. He's already branched out a little bit into the NASCAR stuff, so he's kind of has a question mark, and it really depends on which route he goes. Outside of Bobby Pierce not knowing what he's going to do, I'm going to go Formula One and Charles. Well, if you're from Alamance County, it's Charles Leclerc, but Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc. I mean, first year with the Ferrari guys, and he's already better than his teammate Sebastian Vettel. And Sebastian Vettel's a name that we really could have. We really could have put on for our Formula One list. But he's already, in my opinion, and it's not really an opinion, just watching the races, he out-qualifies them. He out-races them a lot of the times. Excellent car control. What he did at Monaco this year is just amazing. And a track you cannot pass at, and to be able to pass cars. He already, first year he already has a win. The future is very, very bright for that young man, and if he sticks with Ferrari or just sticks in Formula One in general, I think he's going to be an all-timer.
All right, here's another one, real quick one, just quick action. We both agree John Force is the best interview of anybody on any list.
Yes.
So let's name someone under John Force. Who is of your favorite drivers across these disciplines, at least the most entertaining in an interview, because no one will top John Force. Just go listen to the Dale Jr. download. John Force's interview. It's full of...
It's him interviewing himself, pretty much.
Basically.
Okay, now is this off the names we've mentioned, or just off the disciplines?
Just all in general, all encompassing in general. Someone that you love to just hear interview.
Jimmy Owens. That's the first one that comes to my mind outside John Force. Jimmy Owens has just that Tennessee drawl. He picks on himself. He picks on others. He doesn't take it too serious, and he's always chomping that gum, smiling and stuff. And he's just a fun guy. He just seems like a fun dude.
Ward Burton will never be topped. Ward Burton, my grandpa, I don't really know who he was necessarily. I don't think he had a guy, my grandpa Whitehead, but he wanted Ward Burton in the top 5 for one reason, so that Ward Burton had to give an interview. And if you go look up on YouTube, Ward Burton is pissed. You hear his ones where he's upset. If you like John Boy and Billy, his attempt to say cat skid steer loader. Yeah. There's nothing to me other than John Force that beat a Ward Burton interview.
Okay. All right, one more. Okay, I guess this will be the last one for me. Just off the cuff.
Last one till we think of something else.
Yeah, last one till we think of something else. All right, we left two-wheelers off of our list.
We sure did.
Just off the top of your head. I don't care about the stats stuff. Just off the top of your head. Best two-wheeler. I'm just going to leave it open. Two-wheel in general. Best two-wheeler you've ever seen.
Ricky Carmichael.
Okay.
Ricky Carmichael, not just off, obviously his Supercross speaks for itself, but I applaud Ricky for being willing to go try NASCAR. It didn't work out. He didn't win, but I applaud him for at least making that commitment. He built a dirt track in his backyard just to run the four-wheel cars on. I think he had a legend car that he would go out there and he would do it every day. And even though it didn't work out, I applauded him for at least trying. And then when he came back to X Games, when he did, I think it was called Step Up, that competition in X Games, I mean, it raised the roof on that whole thing because all these guys, Pastranas and all these guys that were doing tricks, they all grew up watching Ricky Carmichael. Mm-hmm. And I mean, his record is incredible. So it's I'm leaving out the superbikes and stuff, and I know I'm a sinner for that. But I mean, it was hard to beat Ricky Carmichael.
I would go. This is a tough one, but I'd go Bubba Stewart, man. I mean, James Stewart is his real name, but Bubba Stewart, he revolutionized that sport, which was already pretty revolutionized from guys like Carmichael and Pastrana. But that 2008 season, motocross, he won every moto in every race. He swept that season. That's motocross. That's your outdoor. Supercross is your indoor stuff. I think somewhere around 50 wins for Supercross, 450 wins. I think he's second all time on the motocross stuff, like right at 100, it's like 98, 99 wins, something like that. But I mean, the way he revolutionized the sport, and he was the man to beat there for that stretch in the mid to late 2000s. The money that he brought in, he had a TV show, just bringing it to where it was. I mean, he quote unquote invented the Bubba Scrub. I mean, he was doing stuff that nobody was doing on the bike, and I mean, he was just that amount of athleticism to see on a bike. I mean, the scrub, if you guys don't know, like when you hit a jump, instead of just staying straight up, you whip. I guess would be like you see that in X Games and stuff. You throw a whip and you want to get that bike vertical, and it cuts off the amount of air time so you can get back down quicker. And he pretty much just came up with his own style of doing that. And I mean,
now everybody does.
And now everybody does it.
You
have to do it now if you want to be competitive. So. Bubba Stewart. I was a big Mike LaRocco fan, but he didn't quite have the success. David Millsaps is another one. He's just one that's kind of traversed a few different decades there. Not quite the success, but Bubba Stewart. Quick shout out to Valentino Rossi with the Superbikes. He was the kind of the man back there too.
And you know what? I think that's a good time to put a bow on it. I think we have definitely gone long enough for a Bojangles break.
That's right.
But, that was a ton of fun. See, that's what we started this whole thing for. We got to have this conversation the way we wanted to, and I applaud you for coming up with the way to do it, because I had a ton of fun looking it up, brother. It was a blast.
Absolutely, man. This is one we can come back and do a part two, or just all the guys that we did leave off for, the different disciplines we didn't get to. But, yeah, we're very fortunate to see some of the greatest of all time in their own right across many disciplines.
Yep, and just more to come.
That's right.
Just got to watch Dirt Vision, or get out to your local short track, or Dirt on Dirt, whatever subscription service you watch. Get out there and watch them.
Support it, guys. Yeah. You got to support it. Locally, nationally, whatever, the way the economy is and stuff. We all love it and enjoy it and entertain it, but it takes money to make it go around, so support it.
Yeah, so, all right, brother. Thank you for listening to yet another edition of the Half Price Concessions podcast. Do us a favor and be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Castbox, or Pocket Cast. That way you can get updated every time we put out new episodes of the podcast. And if you really want to do us a favor, leave us a rate and review on any of those apps. It helps us out a ton in ratings and helps steer more people toward the podcast. Thank you for listening, and have a blessed day.